All right, there it goes. All right. Hi, folks. Happy Friday. Welcome back to the PagerDuty Twitch channel. I'm Mandy Wallace, DevOps Advocate at PagerDuty. I'm back here again with Frank and his cat this week for
Yep.
a bit of how to happy hour and some events orchestration stuff. Starting with some of our housekeeping. We're here on Fridays, most Fridays. I've been off the last couple weeks for travel. You can always find us on twitch.tv/PagerDuty. If you have any questions or if you'd like to be on our show, we would love to hear from you. You can email my team, we're community-team@pagerduty.com, or you can ask questions about the product and stuff on our forums at community.pagerduty.com. Additionally, next week, on Mondays, Darmaine has the Unplanned show. I think next week she's talking to Nicole about API stuff, so that should be pretty good. Wednesdays, Jose Antonio has Terraform time, and I'll be back on Friday for How to Happy Hour. I'm not sure what we had a guest cancel for next Friday, so we'll see what happens. And then Process Automation folks have a release notes stream that will be Tuesday in the afternoon Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Eastern and 10:30 a.m. Pacific with Tiago and Jake and Forrest. So that'll be good to go. So now I'm going to turn it all over to Frank and his cat. Sounds like a diesel engine. So
yes, this is me and Mr. Bitters, who will probably, hopefully, leave us alone at some point. But we'll see. He might just snuggle in.
That's all right. It's all good.
Yeah, Mr. Bitters he's happy to help.
That's awesome. What's Mr. Bitters know about event orchestration, dude?
He knows that it's what I talk about all day long, and he likes to hang out on my desk and participate whenever I talk to customers. So
that's awesome.
He's basically a mini marketing rep at this point.
That's excellent. Absolutely perfect. All right, I'll put your screen up and we can go when you're ready.
Cool. Well, it's nice to be talking to folks. So for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Frank. I'm a product manager here in the AI Ops team at PagerDuty, and I work with event orchestration. And so what I wanted to do was take some time to talk about some tips and tricks, some background on this session. I was actually doing some research, and I like to go to a bunch of different forums and blogs. So I was sitting on Stack Overflow looking through some of the common issues that teams deal with in incident response, and I saw half of the things that came up, the answer was event orchestration can totally solve that problem.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to come here to take some time to kind of walk through what are some of the most common issues that I see folks talking about online about incident response and how event orchestration can help solve those. So perfect. I have condensed this down to five examples.
Sweet. I'm looking forward to this. We do get plenty of questions in the forums about event orchestration as well. And also some stuff that, like you say, probably should just be solved with event orchestration. So excited to hear all about this.
Awesome. So I guess with that, I will jump right in to, there we go. Is this the first one? This is the first page. So the first problem that I saw come up, I think this is the most popular one that I saw come up online. And what folks were saying is they have an alerts integration that sends in alerts for different servers, and they all have different SLAs. So, it's not just production and dev servers. Maybe it's, you have servers for a certain region that just has different SLAs than your primary region. But folks were getting really frustrated because they were like, well, these different regions have different SLAs. I'm getting notified either too much or not enough. How can I deprioritize certain alerts from certain regions based on their alert data? And so what you'll see is people will be like, well, in my monitoring tool, I indicate things like server, region, priority, things like that. I want to be able to use that data in PagerDuty to make sure that, I'm only dealing with the SLAs that are important. And with event orchestration, super easy. So whenever I see stuff like this, the first thing I think of is conditions, suppression, enrichment. That's what you're looking for. PagerDuty built out a really powerful condition, condition language for this. It's called PCL, so that you can really precisely target these things and make sure they're being treated appropriately. And so what I'll do is for all of these, I will switch over to my demo instance, and I'll kind of walk through how I would solve this. So if my team was setting up a new service and they had this problem, this is what they would do. And for this demo, I'm going to use my AWS service because it's my best configured service. So I would go over here. I go to, not that, go back. go to Event Orchestration. And, 1 second, the cat is like, he's causing problems. There we go. I'd make a new rule, and I would start to look for those events that indicate sort of a server that has a lower SLA. And one of the things we've done recently is we've actually expanded the number of events that show up here in the recent events. If you've used this in the past, you would have seen 5 events showing up here. It's up to 10 now. We're actually going to improve this a little bit next year as well. But let's say, for example, this EC2 instance, I know that anything with severity of warning is really not super important. I can deprioritize it. And you can see here, all I did was I just clicked on that field. So if you want to make conditions really, really quickly, you click on a field, makes a condition. It's super easy. I hit next. And then there's a couple of different ways I can deal with deprioritizing these kinds of alerts. Suppression is kind of the easiest one. So this means that you're not going to get an incident at all. If you're getting alerts that are coming in and they really are not valuable in any way, suppression is a great option. But for this one, I'm actually going to go ahead and just change it to a P4. I'm going to change it to warning, and I'm going to hit save. And with that, a couple of seconds, and you're basically done. So I know a lot of tools, it can be kind of cumbersome to set all this up upstream, but in event orchestration, we've kind of made it pretty much effortless to get all this going. And what I'll say too is if you do tend to use the same sorts of monitoring tools across multiple teams, another option is also if you ingest things globally, you can make the same kind of rule. I'm getting different events here, but you could say look for, in this case, critical, which is important. And I can make the same rule at the global level, do the same sorts of actions. There you go, warning. And then this will actually propagate out to all of my services as well. So say you have a large organization, you have to configure these sorts of rules for like 10, 20, one person who's using this for 3,000 services.
Yeah.
A couple clicks, one rule, and you're done. So it's a lot easier to configure this in PagerDuty than it is upstream. And so that's how I would solve that, which is our most commonly requested problem to solve. Yeah, and that took seconds. Like that's
super slick, right? Yeah, really easy.
Cool. So what's another one? So there we go. This is an interesting one. So this is one that can be kind of fun. So say you have an integration that is really noisy. So it's sending a lot of events into PagerDuty. The first one will create an incident. Other ones that are coming in, sometimes it resolves, and they might actually accidentally close an incident before you fix things. So say you're getting data from Datadog. Your numbers are starting to return back to normal, so you're getting results from Datadog, but you haven't actually fixed the problem yet. That can inadvertently start closing things off in PagerDuty while you're still working on them. And so people ask, is it possible to go into my monitoring tools and change it so that I'm not sending in these really noisy events that are disrupting incident response? And you can do that, but there's actually an interesting thing that you can do in PagerDuty that takes substantially less time and can actually have the same sort of outcome. And that's actually using what we call event action overrides. And again, enrichment. And so event action overrides here are whenever an event comes into PagerDuty, it basically gets stamped with either a trigger, an acknowledge, or a resolve. And that basically controls how PagerDuty will automatically trigger, acknowledge, or resolve incidents. And what's happening here in this problem is basically those events are coming in with resolve actions attached to them before it's time to resolve. But in event orchestration, we give you the ability to actually turn all of that off. And there's some really neat side effects that happen with that. And so I'll do this one globally again, but everything I'll show you right now, you can do globally across all of your services at once, or you can do it at the service level. It works the exact same in both instances. But what you can do in these situations is say, I'm looking at this event, it's sending me CPU utilization rates. So I can say, you see this API request star rate event coming in. The first thing I can do is go to this alert data tab, which controls everything to do with how alerts are ingested and what data is associated with them. And I can click one of these 2 buttons. And they're not buttons that people know a whole lot about. They're kind of scary if you know what you do. But what they do is they override that event action that gets stamped onto alerts as they're ingested. And so if I click this button, basically what's going to start happening is all of those events coming in from Datadog that are resolved, they're going to be changed into triggers instead. And so say previously an event would come in at a certain incident, maybe 5-10 minutes would pass. A resolve event might come in and close it down erroneously. If I tick this button, that resolve event will turn to a trigger event. And what's really fun about that is if you send in multiple trigger events for an incident that's live, they get deduplicated into each other. But with each dedupe, they actually update all of the data in the active incident. And so by clicking this button, not only can I stop that resolve from happening prematurely with like literally done, it's like 15 seconds, it's very, very quick to do. But I also have the opportunity to come in here and actually start overriding some fields. So I could say, add information as a custom detail. So, trigger count. How many times has this happened? I can change things like the source or the grouping, add any data I want. And then because all of these events are now going to dedupe into the active incident, each time they do, that incident is going to get richer and richer data. So what you'll be able to do is turn those, historically sort of annoying resolving events into now events that actually add value. So each one that comes in, you get a progressively more accurate and higher value incident. I'm not going to do that here, but you hit save, and then as those events come in, they dedupe, and you've solved that problem. And again, a lot easier to solve that in PagerDuty than it is upstream. Just a couple of seconds there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can imagine, like, you've got some threshold that you're alerting on, and as it declines, you eventually get back into things that are better, and it feels like it's resolved. But where you really want to make sure you've resolved it is when it's way back down, way below the threshold. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to be like, it's recovering, everyone can go back to work, and then boom, it gets worse again.
Oh, wait. It's not over yet.
No, not yet.
Awesome.
Cool. So what's the next one? Okay, so this one's fun. So this one comes up a decent amount too, especially if you have like really interesting modern solutions that are out there that are pulling in a lot of data. What we get asked is that like there's high quality data that exists in these events and these alerts, but when they turn into incidents, you tend to only get a couple of fields show up. At PagerDuty, we call this Ceph formatting, so common event format. But basically, there's like 4 or 5 fields. Every incident gets them. And when an event is transformed, we take all the data that came from your monitoring tools, we put what we can into the standardized formatting, and the rest of it gets left behind in what's called the raw event.
Yeah.
But a lot of people need that data. And it's kind of a pain to get it in PagerDuty. I can show you how you would actually get access to this information within PagerDuty without event orchestration. But event orchestration does have the ability for you to actually enrich incidents with all of this data. So when an incident's created, the responder has everything they need like directly on the incident right away. And I'll kind of show you how we do that and what the difference is between what most people experience when they send data in and what's possible. And so if I navigate back, and let me see if I have an active incident. I usually have an active incident. So let's go to this one. And I'll kind of walk people through what I'm talking about here. So if I say go to this very first alert, well, for starters, on this page, what you're seeing here is what we call Ceph transformed data or normalized data. So you can see there's things like responders, assignments. I get some business service information. If there is things like urgency or other sort of generic information available, it would be displayed here. But all the data that came through on my Azure alert is missing. And so if you don't use event orchestration, what you do is you click this, the summary, you gotta find it. That takes you to this page. And then from here, which you can use, you can hit view message.
Yes.
Then it takes you to this page. And so this is actually what we got sent. So this is what's actually coming from where my monitoring tool is about my Azure SQL database. And so you can see there's a lot more data here than what showed up on the incident page. And if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, your phone's still going off, your manager's trying to get a hold of you, production's down, that was like 3 or 4 clicks in to find out, some pretty critical information. It's like finding out from the Azure Health source, what's exactly going on in your monitoring tool. That's pretty important information. So ideally, you'd want to pull all of that out, and you'd want to be able to reference it on the incident page when it's first created. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to grab this. I'll just hit copy there. And I'm going to use that again in a second. And so the way you'd be able to surface all this data a lot more rapidly to responders is you would go to Event Orchestration. I'm going to go back to my tips and tricks. And you'd make a rule that leverages, I'm just going to say, why not this? A rule that leverages what's called raw event data. And so what I can do here is I can say make a new custom detail. I'm going to call it consumption rate. And then I can do raw events dot payload dot custom detail dot boom.
Okay.
I hit save, and again that took seconds. And now what's going to happen is every time events come in and they match this rule, that data that was hidden in the raw event payload will actually get pulled out. It shows up on the screen basically right below custom fields. You'll see a section that has custom details, and anything you populate in here is going to show up. It's going to be formatted. It's going to pull whatever was out of that event and put it right in the middle of the page for you to view right away. It's going to save a ton of time during an incident.
Oh yeah, that's super handy. We do get a lot of questions about folks get the weirdest stuff out of their native tools.
Oh, yeah.
Prometheus dumps weird stuff into alerts all the time. And we get a lot of questions about that. And like, this is so much easier than say like a custom event transform that is like a whole other piece of like JavaScript code that they could put together. This is a whole lot simpler to manage and maintain instead of.
Oh yeah, and it's one of our most used features. It's actually funny you mentioned Prometheus. When I was looking at this particular problem statement, that was the tool that came up most often.
I have no surprise.
For requesting this.
Yes.
I mean, it's this and probably CloudWatch are like the two front runners.
Yes, that's another one that's it's very helpful. It's trying really hard to help you, but it's dumping it all into strange places. So.
Yeah, well, now you can fix all that. Put right out.
Awesome.
And again, with all of this, like my goal with this session is really like to get everyone some time back. And with all of these problems, you know, you can go to event orchestration, and these are all second levels of work to start getting teams time back.
Yeah.
I know I'm busy these days. I'm sure a lot of people are. And getting time back in a couple of seconds is the way to go.
Definitely.
So what's up next? I have a load from a variety of different sources, all being ingested the same integration. Some are critical and some aren't, but they all resort in high priority incidents.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different from that first case I talked about. When we opened, I was kind of talking about you're looking at events coming in, they have payload data, really want to target certain payloads and then change priorities accordingly. This one has a lot more to do with sources. And so this is kind of fun in that if you know enough about your raw event data, you can actually be kind of cute and change how you target your events to deprioritize certain integrations and certain monitoring tool sources. So this is another one where it's a little bit hidden, but you can really cut down on noise, especially if you know which monitoring tools are causing noise. Just a couple of tricks. So for this one, I'm actually going to go back to that active incident, and I'm going to look at its raw event payload to kind of pull out some of this secret information that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So we're like going to go into the like boiler room of PagerDuty event data with this one. So if I hit view message and I go back to the same screen, there's a couple of really useful things in this raw event data that you can actually target with event orchestration. One of them is this routing key. And so routing keys are how data gets into PagerDuty. You can either have global routing keys or you can have service level integrations, which still have routing keys. They just look a little bit different. Fun fact, if you ever see a routing key that starts with R0, it's a global integration that pulled this data in versus a service level integration. So I know that this is
okay.
Well, yeah, especially if you're trying to target something specifically. So say, I know with folks who use Dynatrace, they'll have multiple different global integration keys, and so you actually target the specific global integration key you want to work with. But in this case, I can actually look at its routing key. I can take that, or I could take where is it? Up here, some of our integrations actually reference what tool they came from
Yeah.
as well. And so you can target that. It looks like Azure isn't sending it through, but I know CloudWatch does. They'll actually stamp in the source field what the specific monitoring tool is. But for this, I'm going to take the routing key. And then I'm going to go back to this service. Because again, my goal is to make sure that this is not bothering me. So anything ingested from that routing key, I know that it tends to be a lower priority, and I just want to blanket deal with everything at once. So I'm going to go to, again, the orchestration rules. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to say if it's raw events dot payload dot custom details dot routing key matches that, boom, the condition's made. Now what I can do is I can actually say like P5. So deprioritize everything coming from this routing key. Info level, I could be really mean. I could suppress it. I'm not going to. But you can do a lot with this. You can even add a note saying like, hey, this is coming from a really noisy key. I think it's some staging environment. Fine. Spell it properly. Save. Now what I'm doing is saying every single event that comes in that's from that routing key, deprioritize it, set to P5, set to severity, and let people know that like, hey, this is not important. We don't have to focus on it. And now you've basically cut down an entire stream of events worth of data. We just know it's not valuable. And maybe this event, it's going to add interesting information for like a diagnostics or root cause analysis. But now it's not going to distract teams if it comes in. And again, that took substantially less time than going back and potentially dealing with, if this global integration is dealing with lots of different monitoring tools.
Yeah.
With this one tool or one rule, I could cover 10, 15 different monitoring tools all at once. So yeah, that's a fun one. And also, now you know where that data was.
Yeah, definitely.
And then for the final one, because I tried to keep this short, only 5 issues. This one's interesting. So alerts keep getting ingested into PagerDuty for an active incident while I'm trying to fix it. How can I make sure I only get notified each time? And so this issue kind of comes up in 2 forms, which is why there's like so many ways to solve it. You can use suppression, pausing, thresholds. But really what it boils down to is one of 2 situations. Either, only let me know once an hour. So say create a distinct incident every hour because, I know that this incident can't happen more than once an hour, so don't bother me if it's happening more than that. Or it can be a situation where you're just getting inundated by multiple different incidents. It's kind of an alert storm. You don't necessarily want to group things together. You want that data, but you only want to create a single incident.
Yeah.
Both of those problems can come up. And I'll show you how to deal with both of those. I'll kind of give you all the different possible options for dealing with this scenario, because it does come up a lot, and we do have a lot of choices. So for this one, I'm going to go back to my event orchestration, tips and trick, event orchestration, and I'm going to name these because there's so many options. So I'm going to start by saying throttling method. So the first way that you can deal with something like this is you could say, make a frequency-based rule. And so the way these rules work is they will match against events only once a certain number of them have been met within a certain period of time. And you can either say, create things on a heartbeat. So like create every 5th event, create an incident. Every 5th event match.
Okay.
You can have it so it will match until you've hit your 5th event. Or you can have it where it only match once you've hit 5 events. And so there's a lot of flexibility in how this works. By default, we use sort of the start matching true once you've hit a certain volume, which in this case would not really work well. What we want to say is, let's say we're going for that 1 hour use case. We would say when more than one event matches this rule within 1 hour, or you could say, let's do 2. 1, and then go like that, 2. So what this will do is this will mean that the first event that comes in every hour will trigger an incident. And then afterwards, everything else will stop matching this. And the fun thing I did here is you'll notice this little icon is grayed out. If you do want to access some of the other threshold-based rules that we support, what you can do is you can go into this PCL editor here by clicking the chevrons, and you can edit both this button. So if I change it back, you'll see I can go back to the old view. And you can also do resetting trigger, and this will create a heartbeat monitor. And so there's kind of like some hidden conditions you can set up. Some advanced users can set up if they know about it. And in this case, this is actually the condition I want. So I'm going to hit next. And I'm going to say for the very first thing that comes in, it's a P1, it's critical, save. And then what'll happen is with this throttling method, the first incident or the first event that comes in will trigger, and then nothing else will trigger for the rest of this hour. And I can do that by setting fallback criteria, suppress. So everything beyond that first event that comes in every hour, it won't match this. It'll default to your fallback behavior. It'll suppress. You don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of option 1 for dealing with this problem. Option 2 is the pausing method. And for folks who are following along, every time I go in here and I type something at the top of this rule, I name it. So next time I come back to my event orchestration, I don't have to guess what I was doing here. I actually know what each of these rules do. And it actually shows up here on the side panel as well. I go back here and capitalize that P and keep going. So for the pausing method, I'm going to say for everything else, again, my goal is to only get 1 alert every hour. I can start pausing things. So I can say pause all of my alerts for, I don't know how many seconds is in an hour. I'm going to guess it's 1440, and I'm almost positive that's wrong. But I can start pausing things. So I could say, instead of using the throttle to evaluate these rules, pause them. And what that means is every event will come in, it'll automatically get paused for an hour, and then it'll only re-trigger if the incident is still active after that hour.
Okay.
The nice thing about this is it's objectively an easier rule to write, and say you do have valid events that come in within that hour, they still have the opportunity to trigger incidents if they are legitimate. So you're not missing anything that might come up. So that's kind of a fun option too.
Yeah.
And then what's the other one? I think there was a third option for dealing with this. Yes. So the third one is using enrichment and conditions to impact how, say, alert grouping could work. Because alert grouping is another great way to solve this. So I could say alert grouping method, hit next. And then what I can do is, and again, my goal is to cut back on noise, is I could come in here and I could actually rewrite some of my event fields to influence how grouping works so that all incidents, regardless of what their summary of the data could be, trigger and then group into the same incident that was created at the start of the hour. So this is the most complex one, but this is actually, my team uses this. So I could say something like dedupe key, and then concatenate that onto summary. My syntax is good. And then what that'll do is that'll actually append your dedupe key, or this could be anything. This could be like, some sort of originating data point, something to help alert grouping identify that these incidents are related. It'll rewrite the summary, concatenating that value into the front. And then what'll happen is, my syntax is wrong. That's okay. Incidents. There we go. And then once my incident is created, it will have mutated summaries, and then alert grouping can kick in to, again, try and group all of those events together and cut back on that noise.
Okay. So for that one, we get this question sometimes too, like say some deep backend is very slow or underperforming or it's down, you can kind of get a lot of alerts from everything that depends on that thing because that backend is misbehaving. And you can use this kind of methodology to mitigate that. Everybody says, oh, my queries are slow. Just pile this into this same backend incident.
Yeah, totally. And then, like I said, there's kind of 3 options to do it. And it depends on why you're getting too many events, what your end goal is, how you run incident response. One of the things we like to say with event orchestration is like you can pick your own adventure.
Yeah.
You can pretty much use it to do anything you want. And so dependent on what your end goal is, any of these three things will help solve that problem. And it just boils down to, what's going to work best for your team.
Yeah, sweet.
Cool. So yeah, those are the 5 things I wanted to work through. That's the last problem statement over here. So I guess I'll go back to this screen. But I'm happy to take any questions. Like again, my goal here is to come and help people get some time back with event orchestration tips and tricks. So if there are questions, fire them over. But if not, hopefully this is going to help some people get some time back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. We haven't had anything come in, but if you are watching us on, I know there's a few folks out there live on Twitch, and there's definitely some folks out there live on LinkedIn. I can see your comments if you want to post a question in the chat on either of those platforms. We do get some questions from folks like, at the baseline, what's the best practice for deciding between that global set of rules and your service level rules? Are there things people should be thinking about as they're applying these?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I would say my recommendation is always these global rules work really great if you tend to do the same things over and over again. One of the folks I work with, they have about 1,000 services that come in through a single global integration key here. And then what'll happen is for each one of those services, they kind of do the same thing over and over again. So if I go back to this first rule, I could break this entire page and say all events and change it to a P1 and hit save. And then in that use case, they're basically configuring all 1,000 services at the same time. So instead of writing 1,000 rules, maintaining 1,000 individual Terraform scripts for each individual service, you can come in here, you can write that rule once, it'll propagate across your organization. And so anytime where you're doing repetitive work with the same things over and over and over again, for each of your services, you want to manage that centrally. Global orchestration is your friend. The other situation it can be really valuable is, say you're having trouble making sure incidents get on the right teams. So, an incident comes in, maybe it's been ingested for team A and it has to move to team B, or maybe there was a confusion and you have to pull in multiple teams. A way to get around that is to actually use global orchestration to affect how service routing is done. And so service routing at PagerDuty is basically how you get an event from a global integration key to an individual service. So I could come in here, I could pick that Azure service from earlier, I could write a rule, and I can say, anything that contains the integrations component, send that to Azure going forward.
Oh, okay.
But what people can sometimes struggle with is maybe you don't have all the data you need when this event is ingested to figure out what the right service is. And that's when you can get things go into the wrong team. Global orchestrations can help with that because anything you do at this global level gets applied before service routing takes place. So you could do something like create a new custom detail that says service route Twitch, anything you want, hit save. That's going to get enriched onto this event at this global level before any routing takes place. So I could come in here, fix all of my events, enrich them with information about what services should be going to, whether it be like a major incident service, a maintenance service, maybe, we just launched something on a funnel more events to the team I just launched something for. You can set all of that up and then go to service routes, and you can actually target that field now. So I could say event.custom details dot service route matches Twitch, save. And then what'll happen now is your events will actually start following this new routing path. So they're kind of the two most common examples of when these global orchestrations. Service orchestrations are great for individual teams. So, an event has been ingested, it has made it to the proper team. This is a team of SMEs. They have strong DevOps practices, they know exactly what to do. Once at the service level, those teams, because they have so much experience and knowledge about their data, are able to do much more complex things. So they can do really specific transformations, adding the exact fields that are relevant for their teams, but no one else. They could add notes saying, hey, whenever this incident comes in, here's your standard operating procedure. It's like, oh, this comes up all the time. new engineers on call, they look at the note, they know how to solve it right away. That's something that really is better out at the service level because it requires specific knowledge. Service level is also better for things like automation.
Yeah.
So I'm able to add an automation action. You know, these are configured, the provision for specific teams. So like if I'm looking at this dropdown, I know for a fact that this AWS integration automation will work for my team based on this service's data and configuration. And so I can deploy automations a lot more reliably and comfortably because I know all of this data coming in and I'm familiar with it. And so that's really what we see a lot of at that service orchestration level is the specific stuff that's going to make your individual team win because of the data that you know about that team.
Cool. And all that extra payload, like that travels the whole way through the entire list.
Yeah.
It doesn't get dropped off anywhere or anything like that.
Yeah, it's available all along the way. So you can write conditions against it. The way to do that is you do raw event payload dot whatever. This allows you to access that raw event payload. We default this to event because it's the most common way to write it, but that raw event payload is still there for you to use. You can still access it. A lot of people don't know this. You can actually access it in your notes. So I can say like, you know, raw events dot payload dot source. That'll actually add that raw payload information to a note on the page. So you could say like, hey Carl, you know, look at this source. That's probably what's going on. That'll get added. Similar in transformations, you can access all of it. And actually, people don't know this. It's kind of fun. You can access it for payloads too in webhooks. So say you're triggering an ad hoc webhook, whether it's like reaching out to Rundeck or Ansible or anything like that, you can actually populate that webhook with all that raw event data as well. So it travels along the entire journey, and it's accessible at each of these stages just by doing that raw event, spelling it properly, payload access point.
Awesome. Well, I learned something today. I didn't realize you could dump those into notes. That's awesome. So that's super
cool. It's like we should probably have something on the screen that says, hey, you can do that. We actually have a release coming out soon that will start saying that. But yeah, no, it'll totally work in notes as well. So there's a lot of power that you can build into that, especially if you're giving people resolution instructions.
Yeah, or just locations to find all the other stuff that's coming in. So yeah,
totally.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Cool. Like I've definitely picked up some tricks here. So yeah, if folks out there, if you still have any questions or anything about event orchestration, you want to let us know, you can check out the community forums there and we'll try and get you answers to any of the other questions you might have. Play around with these, let us know what you think, and if there's other stuff that you'd be looking for, it might already be there, but otherwise we'll take a look. So
cool,
really cool. All right, Frank, thank you. We're missing your feline co-star there, but
he's hiding. He's behind my laptop. He's like he's right down there.
It's warm there, so
it is.
It's fine. It's all good. So. All right, folks, we'll wish everybody an uneventful weekend. Dormain will be back on Monday with the Unplanned Show, talking to Nicole. And yeah, Frank, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.